Hello, hello, hello. Wow. We've made it, everyone. Tonight, we stream. What do we stream? We stream the final chapters of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Holy crap. Carlina? All right, we'll read a page in a British accent. Don't you worry. We will read many pages in a British accent, I assume. Um, but yeah, welcome to the stream, guys. Oh my god. By guys, I mean just Colin. No, but this has been so fun. What a crazy book. And also what a funny way, like I'm reading this book at all because there was another book that I read, All the Light We Cannot See, that mentioned this book a lot. And then I heard about it from a friend and how much she enjoyed reading it. And then it brought me to wanting to read it and wanting to read it on stream and share it with the reading community on Twitch. And it's been such a fun time. And I've like about halfway through the process started uploading the streams to YouTube. So I don't know if anyone's gonna watch this, but I just wanted to say a little like thing about, if you are one of the people watching any of these videos on YouTube, I just wanted to say thank you so much for your viewership. Whether you're like, listening to these videos to fall asleep or whether it's like helping you read this book for an English class or an assignment or something. Thank you for choosing to watch these videos. Yeah, I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, feel free to let me know how you found me and what you thought of the book. Um, okay, all that aside, I suppose we should just jump into this. I'll say one more thing though. Um, we're gonna have a little treat at the end, a little performance, if you will. So yeah, right at the very end of the stream, stick around. There will be a musical performance. Um, but until that time, I believe it's time to jump in to 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea by Jules Verne. I'm going to cover my viewfinder with this. Hold on. Chapter 21. As it's already been requested that I read the first page in a British accent for you all. So here in my dubious effort to endlessly entertain you, I will do my best to comply. All right. All right, chapter 21. A hecatomb. The captain's strange manner of speaking, the expected appearance of that spectacle, the story of that patriotic ship, first related in cold words, but becoming increasingly emotional toward the end. The mention of the name Avenger, whose significance did not escape me, had a profound effect on me. I could not take my eyes off the captain. He stood there, his arms stretched toward the sea, his ardent eyes fixed upon that glorious wreck. Would I ever know who he was, where he came from, or where he was going? Perhaps. More and more, I was becoming aware of the man in him as distinct from the scientist. I was beginning to realize that no ordinary misanthropy had caused him and his men to seek refuge in the Nautilus. It was rather a deep hatred, monstrous or sublime, a hatred that would never diminish. Was this hatred still seeking vengeance? I was soon to know. In the meantime, the Nautilus had kept rising to the surface, and the confused outline of the Avenger gradually receded into the background. A slight roll of the craft soon told me that we had come to the surface. Just then, a muffled boom was heard. I glanced at the captain. He stood, motionless. "Captain?" I asked. He did not reply. I left him and went up to the platform. Conseil and the Canadian were already there. "Where did that explosion come from?" I asked. I looked in the direction of the ship that I had previously seen. It was drawn closer to the Nautilus and was coming toward us at full speed. 6 miles now separated us. "A cannon shot," replied Ned Land. "What kind of a ship is it, Ned?" "Judging by her rigging and the height of the masts," replied the Canadian, "I should say she's a man-of-war. I hope she attacks the infernal Nautilus and, if necessary, sinks us." "Friend Ned," replied Conseil, "what harm can she possibly do the Nautilus? Can she attack us underwater or bombard us at the bottom of the sea?" Okay, that was the end of the page. The end of the British performance. I hope you enjoyed that. We will continue forward in my native tongue. But thank you for that. Okay. Tell me, Ned, I asked, can you recognize the nationality of that ship? The Canadian knitted his eyebrows, lowered his eyelids, and peered intently at the ship. "No, monsieur," he replied. "I cannot tell you what nation she belongs to. She's not flying any flag, but she's certainly a warship because she has a long, pertinent fluttering from her main mast." For a quarter of an hour, we continued to watch the ship speeding toward us. But I could not believe that from the distance she could have sighted the Nautilus, still less have identified it as a submarine. Soon the captain told me that she was a big warship, with 2 armor-plated decks and a ram. Dense smoke was pouring from her twin funnels. Her sails were so closely furled that they merged with the outline of the yards. She was flying no flag at her mast. She was still too far away for me to make out the colors of her pendant, which were floating in the breeze like a light ribbon. She was approaching rapidly. If Captain Nemo allowed her to come in close, we might have yet a chance to escape. "Monsieur," said Ned Land, "even if that ship comes within a mile of us, I intend to jump into the sea, and I suggest you do the same." I made no reply to the Canadian's suggestion, but continued to watch the ship, which kept looming larger and larger. Whether she was British, French, American, or Russian, she would surely welcome us on board if only we could reach her. "Monsieur would do well to recall," Conseil suggested, "that we have some experience in swimming together, and he can rely on me to tow him toward the ship, should he decide to follow our friend Ned." I was about to reply when a puff of white smoke appeared at the bow of the warship. A few seconds later, there was a splash in the rear of the Nautilus. A heavy shell had landed in the water. A moment later, we heard the sound of cannon. "Great heavens! They're firing at us!" I cried. "Good luck to 'em," muttered the Canadian. "Well, they certainly do not take us for shipwrecked sailors clinging to their boat. If Monsieur doesn't mind, well," said Conseil, brushing away water that had sprayed over him by another shell, "if Monsieur doesn't mind my saying so, I think they've recognized the narwhal and are firing at it." "But they must have seen by now that there are men here," I exclaimed. "Perhaps that's exactly why they are firing," retorted Ned Land, looking at me. It then dawned on me. A Of course, everyone well knew what the supposed monster had turned out to be. In its encounter with the Abraham Lincoln, when the Canadian had struck the Nautilus with his harpoon, Captain Farragut had realized that the supposed narwhal was, in fact, a submarine, far more dangerous than the monotonous whale. Yes, that must be the case. Doubtless, everywhere at sea, this fearful engine of destruction was being pursued, and instead, excuse me, uh, um, and indeed, one can well imagine how frightful the Nautilus could be if Captain Nemo were using her as a weapon of vengeance. During that night in the Indian Ocean, when he had locked us up in a cell, had he not attacked a ship or other? Had not the man who was now buried in the coral cemetery been a victim of a collision provoked by the Nautilus? Yes, of course, that must be it. A part of Captain Nemo's mysterious existence was becoming clear. If his identity was still unknown, the nations that had joined in their pursuit of him at least knew they were no longer pursuing a phantom, but a man who had sworn an impeccable hatred against them. All that appalling past came to my mind, and I realized that instead of meeting friends on board, that warship was speeding toward us, and we would only meet merciless enemies. In the meantime, more and more shells fell around us. Some, hitting the water, ricocheted and were lost in the distance. None hit the Nautilus. The warship was now only 3 miles away. Despite all the violent cannonading, however, Captain Nemo did not once appear on the platform. Yet if one of those shells had made a direct hit on the hull of the Nautilus, it could have been fatal. Just then, the Canadian spoke up. "Monsieur," he said, "we've got to do everything we can to get out of this. Confound it! Let's signal. Perhaps they will realize that there was some decent men on board." Ned Land took out his handkerchief and was about to wave it when he was struck by a blow of an iron fist and, in spite of his great strength, fell on the deck. "You fool!" cried the captain. "Do you want me to nail you on the prow of the Nautilus before it rams that ship?" Captain Nemo was terrible to hear, and even more terrible to look at. His face had grown so pale that his heart must have stopped beating for a moment. His pupils had contracted frightfully. He was no longer speaking, he was roaring. He had bent down, and with his strong grip was twisting the Canadian by the shoulders. Then he suddenly let go, and turning toward the warship, whose shells were raining around him, he shouted, "Ah, you know who I am, ship of an accursed nation. I do not need to see your colors to recognize you. Look, I am going to show you mine." And walking on the front part of the deck, he unfurled a black flag similar to the one he had planted at the South Pole. Just then, a shell struck the hull of the Nautilus, but obliquely. Instead of piercing it, the shell bounced past the captain, and was lost in the sea. Captain Nemo shrugged his shoulders. Then, turning to me, he said curtly, "You and your friends get down below." "Captain," I explained, "you are going to attack that ship?" "I am going to sink her, monsieur." "You wouldn't do that." "I shall do so," Captain Nemo replied coldly. "Do not presume to judge me. Fate has let me see what you were not supposed to see. We have been attacked. Our answer will be terrible. Get down below." "What ship is that?" "You do not know? So much the better. At least her nationality will remain a secret to you. Down below." The Canadian, Conseil, and I had no alternative but to obey. About 15 sailors from the Nautilus were now standing around their captain, gazing with impeccable hatred at the ship that was bearing down on them. They all seemed to be stirred to their very souls by the same need for vengeance. As I was going down, another shell grazed the hull of the Nautilus, and I heard the captain shout, "Keep firing, you senseless ship! Squander your harmless shells! You will not evade the spur of the Nautilus! You will not perish, but not where you are now. Your remains must not lie amid the glorious remains of the Avenger." I returned to my room. The captain and his second in command were remaining on the platform. The propeller began churning. The Nautilus, speeding away, was soon beyond the range of the shells. The pursuit continued, however, and Captain Nemo was satisfied just to keep his distance. Toward 4 o'clock in the afternoon, unable to contain the impatience and anxiety that was consuming me, I returned to the central stairway. The hatch was still open. I ventured up on the platform. The captain was still pacing nervously up and down. He kept looking at the ship, now 5 or 6 miles to leeward. He kept stalking around like a wild beast, drawing her eastward, permitting himself to be pursued. But he was not attacking. Perhaps he had not made up his mind yet. I wanted to intervene one last time, but no sooner had I spoken to Captain Nemo that he bade me silent. "I am the law. I am justice," he said to me. "I am the oppressed, and there is the oppressor. It is through him that all those whom I loved, cherished, and venerated perished. I loved, cherished, and venerated, perished. My country, my wife, my children, my father, and my mother. Everything I hate is there. Not another word from you." I took one last look at the warship, which was coming on at full steam, and rejoined Ned and Conseil. "We must escape," I cried. "Good," said Ned Land. "What's the name of the ship?" "I do not know, but whatever it is, it will be sunk before nightfall. Whatever happens, it will be better for us to sink with her than to become accomplices in this act of vengeance whose justice we cannot assess with fairness." "I agree with you," Ned Land replied coldly. "Let's wait for nightfall." Night came. A deep silence reigned on board. This compass indicated that the Nautilus had not changed its course. I could hear its propeller churning through the waves at an even speed. We were still on the surface, rolling gently from side to side. My companions and I had decided to make a dash for it as soon as the other ship was close enough to hear us or see us, for the moon, which would be full within 3 days, was shining brightly. Once on board that ship, even if we could not prevent the blow that threatened her, we could at least do everything that circumstances would permit. Several times I thought that the Nautilus was getting in a position to attack, but she was apparently content to let her adversary draw near, then would suddenly resume her flight. Part of the night went by without incident. We watched for the chance to act. We were too excited to talk much. Ned Land wanted to jump in the sea then and there, but I persuaded him to wait. I was of the opinion that the Nautilus would attack the warship on the surface, and this would make it not only possible but easy to escape. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I felt very uneasy and went up on deck. Captain Nemo was still there. He was still standing beneath his flag, which fluttered above him in a light breeze. His eyes remained fixed on the ship. His deep intensity of his gaze seemed to draw it closer, to hold it spellbound, to make it follow him more surely than if it were towed. The moon was now crossing the meridian. Jupiter was rising in the east. In the midst of this tranquil scene, sea and sky vied with each other in peaceful serenity. It seemed as if the sea were offering the moon the most beautiful mirror it had ever had to reflect its beauty. Wow. Oh my God. What a beautiful line. It's crazy. There was just that, intense scene of, an argument, and then there was the the intensity of deciding they were going to escape, and then it's just like he steps out and it's just utter complete peace. Yeah, that chaos versus peace juxtaposition, I guess. I'm gonna reread that little section there because I think it's so beautiful. um the moon was now crossing the meridian. Jupiter was rising to the east. In the midst of this tranquil scene, sea and sky vied with each other in peaceful serenity. It seemed as if the sea were offering the moon the most beautiful mirror it had ever had to reflect its beauty. As I gazed at the serene tranquility of the night, the thought of that hatred that was brewing at the bowels of the almost imperceptible Nautilus made my whole being shudder. The ship was only 2 miles away now. She had drawn closer. She kept following the phosphorescent glow that revealed the presence of the Nautilus. I could see her lantern hanging from the foresail. A dim glow, reflected from her rigging, indicated that the boilers had been stroked up to the utmost. Showers of sparks, ashes, and red-hot cinders of coal escaped her funnels, glittering like so many stars in the darkness. I stood until 6 o'clock in the morning. Damn, 4 hours. No, I guess 3 hours, but right? Yeah, 3. Captain Nemo appeared not to notice me. The ship was only a mile and a half away, and as the first rays of dawn appeared, her cannondale began again. The moment could not be far off now when the Nautilus would attack its enemy, and my companions and I would leave forever that man whom I did not dare to judge. I was about to go below in order to alert my friends when the second in command came up to the platform, followed by several sailors. Either Captain Nemo did not see them, or he did not wish to see them. Certain steps were then taken that might be described as clearing the decks of the Nautilus for action. These steps were quite simple. They lowered the iron railing around the platform and pushed the pilot's cage and that of the searchlight down into the hull until they were flush with the deck. Nothing now protruded from the surface of that long steel cigar-shaped vessel that might hamper her movements. I returned to the saloon. The Nautilus was still on the surface. The light of the day came filtering down through the water. Through the movements of the waves, I caught the occasional red glint of the rising sun shining through the panels. That terrible day of the 2nd of June had dawned. At 7 o'clock, the log indicated that the Nautilus was slackening its speed, and I realized it was letting the other ship draw closer. The sound of gunfire grew louder, shells splashing through the water around us with a strange hissing sound. "My friends," I said, "the time has come. Let us shake hands, and may God be with us." Ned Land was resolute. Conseil was calm, and I was so nervous I could hardly control myself. We entered the library, and just as I was pushing open the door that led to the central stairway, I heard the hatch close suddenly. The Canadian sprang to the steps, but I stopped him. A familiar hissing sound told me that the water was filling the tanks, and a few moments later, the Nautilus dived a few yards below the surface. I knew what this maneuver meant, but it was not too late to do anything about it. The Nautilus had no intention of ramming the warship through her impenetrable armor above the surface. It was going to ram her, but below the waterline, which did not have this protection. Once again, we were prisoners, compelled to witness the grim drama that was about to take place. But we scarcely had time to think. We had all taken refuge in my room, and we looked at each other, speechless. I fell into a deep stupor. My mind stopped thinking. I was in that painful state of suspense that precedes a frightful explosion. I waited and listened, straining my ears, for only my sense of hearing was alive. The speed of the Nautilus had increased perceptibly. She was gathering momentum. Her whole body quivered. Suddenly, I uttered a cry. I had felt a light shock. I could now feel that powerful steel spur penetrating. I could hear sounds of rattling and scraping. The Nautilus, propelled forward by her powerful momentum, plowed right through the body of the ship, just like the needle of a sailmaker through his canvas. I could stand it no longer. Frantic and bewildered, I rushed out of my cabin and into the saloon. Captain Nemo was there, looking through the port panel, silent, cold, and implacable. The huge mass of the ship was sinking. The Nautilus, in order not to miss a single detail of its tragic fate, followed it down into the abyss. 30 feet away from me, I could see the water pouring with thunderous noise into its gaping hull. Soon the double line of cannons and bulwarks came into view, followed by the deck covered with black shadows running in every direction. As the water kept rising, those wretched victims rushed up the shrouds, clung fast to masts, or writhed in the water, a human anthill suddenly invaded by the sea. I stood there, tense, unable to move, struck with horror, my hair standing on end, my eyes wide open, breathless and speechless. I, too, kept looking, held spellbound before that panel by an invisible power. The huge ship sank slowly. The Nautilus followed it, watching its every movement. Suddenly, there was an explosion. The compressed air within the hull had blown the decks up in the air, as if the powder stores had caught fire. Beneath the force of that explosion, the Nautilus swerved. Then the unfortunate ship sank faster. Its topmasts, crowded with victims, appeared, followed by its spars, which were bent beneath the weight of men clinging to them, and finally the top of its main mast. Then the dark mass with all its victims disappeared beneath the sea, swallowed by a whirlpool of churning waters. I turned toward Captain Nemo. That satanic judge, that veritable archangel of hatred, stood there, still watching. When it was all over, he walked to the door of his stateroom, opened it, and disappeared. I followed him. On the far wall, beneath the paintings of his heroes, I saw a portrait of a woman, still young, with two small children. Captain Nemo stood looking at them for a few moments, stretching his arms toward them. Then, falling on his knees, he burst into deep sobs. Wow. That was the end of chapter 21. It's crazy, like, this whole book has kind of like gripped the person reading it to the mystery of what is it about Captain Nemo? Why is he the way he is? Why is he so mysterious? What is he doing on the Nautilus? And why has he taken the three of them as prisoners? And I think this is honestly the book's first like answer to that question. Like, and we still don't really know, but clearly like he has some sort of tragedy in his relationship with his family that has caused him to seek this life of solitude and study on the Nautilus. And yeah, I'm wondering if we're going to learn more about his wife and children in these final 2 chapters. But yeah, that was interesting. So intense. Okay. No time like the present, I suppose. This next chapter is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Only 8 pages, so we're gonna fly through it. Okay. Okay, and this chapter is called Captain Nemo's Last Words, which is the most like crazy title so far, besides Atlantis. And I guess whales and cachalots I was excited for too. But Captain Nemo's Last Words, it brings up a lot of questions, and I think someone's gonna die, and let's get into it. Okay. Okay, chapter 22, Captain Nemo's Last Words. The panels had closed on that frightful scene, but the light in the saloon had not yet gone on again. All was darkness and silence inside the Nautilus. We were leaving that place of desolation at a prodigious speed at a depth of 100 feet. Where were we going? North or south? Where was Captain Nemo fleeing after his horrible vengeance? I returned to my room, where Ned and Conseil sat in silence. I felt an insurmountable horror for Captain Nemo. Whatever he must have suffered at the hands of men, he had no right to punish them in such a manner. He had made me, if not an accomplice, at least a witness to his vengeance. And that was too much. Yeah, that's another wild thing. Like, Captain Nemo has been such a peaceful man. I mean, he's killed some animals, but always for food, and he's made it a point to say that he doesn't kill anyone unless completely or anything for that matter, no animals, unless completely necessary, unless it's for food or survival, right? He doesn't just kill for fun. He's not a hunter. And especially toward people, right? He went out of his way to save someone from some sort of animal attack. I think it was a shark attack, like a bunch of chapters back. So we know him to be a peaceful, like, kind man. So, and whenever one of his crewmates die, which there have been 2, he's been absolutely devastated. So it's it is wild and a huge turn of character toward the end of the book for him to take such a horrific, like, vengeful attack toward the ship, the Avenger, and kill or at least like hurt so many people. So yeah, it's been such a huge shift right here at the end. Clearly, he's not doing well. Maybe some reaching some state of like insanity, perhaps. um, okay. At 11 o'clock, the electric light went on again, and I went into the saloon. It was deserted. I consulted the various instruments. The Nautilus was fleeting northward at 25 miles, sometimes on the surface and sometimes at a depth of 30 feet. Glancing at the chart, I saw that we were sailing off the mouth of the English Channel and that our course was taking us toward the northern seas at an incredible speed. We were traveling so rapidly that I could scarcely catch a glimpse of the long-nosed sharks, the hammer sharks, and the spotted dogfish that frequent these waters. Not to mention the large sea eagles, the swarms of seahorses, looking like knights in a game of chess, the eels writhing along like squids in fireworks, armies of crabs fleeing sideways with their pincers crossed on their shells, and lastly, schools of porpoises, which vied with the Nautilus in speed. However, there was no question in observing, studying, or classifying these creatures just then. It's so funny, like, I wonder if that was, sorry, I keep like doing analysis, but I just keep thinking random things. Um, like this whole book, Verne has been like dumping like factual evidence, or at least like really knowledgeable evidence about like sea life and scientific names and like all these nautical terms, marine biology, like whatever. And then in this little section, he was like crabs, porpoises, sharks, dogfish, and seahorses. Like just the most basic, like sea animals he can think of, like marine life. And like I'm wondering if like he was just getting lazy and like didn't feel like going in depth too much, or B, he was just like, let's give the readers a chance to like relax after all the intensity of the last chapter. Like, let's just like bring it back to porpoises and seahorses. um, yeah, I don't know. It was just funny. Um, okay. By evening, we had covered 200 leagues across the Atlantic. Dusk fell, and the sea was shrouded in darkness until the moon rose. I returned to my room. I could not sleep. I was troubled by nightmares. That tragic scene of destruction kept recurring in my mind. From that day on, who could tell in what region of the North Atlantic the Nautilus was sailing? But always through these northern mists, and always with such speed. Have we skirted Spitzenbergen or Novaya Semlya? Did he sail through these unknown waters of the White Sea, the Kara Sea, the Gulf of Ob, the archipelago of Liarov, or the unexplored coasts of Asia? I could not say. Time went by, and there was no way of calculating, since all the clocks on board had stopped. I had the impression that night and day, as happens in polar regions, no longer followed their natural course. I felt as if I was being led into an eerie world where the overwrought imagination of Edgar Allan Poe would feel at ease. Any moment I expected to see, like the fabulous Gordon Pym, a shrouded human figure, much, much larger in its proportions than any dweller among men, lying athwart that waterfall that bars access to the pole. I calculated, but I may be mistaken, that the Nautilus sped on this hazardous course for 15 or 20 days. I did not know how long this voyage would have lasted if a catastrophe had not occurred to put an end to it. Neither Captain Nemo nor his second in command, nor any member of the crew, had seen for one single moment during this voyage. The Nautilus cruised along the surface. It was only to renew its supply of air. Our bearings no longer appeared on the planisphere. I did not know where we were. I could add that the Canadian, at the end of his strength and his patience, no longer appeared either. Conseil could not get a word out of him, and he was afraid that if a fit of loneliness and melancholy, Ned might commit suicide. I'm sorry, it's not funny. I'm shocked that the author took it there. This is a book for children. I feel like I should add. Like, I found it in the children's section of the library, and like a lot of libraries won't put it in their children's sections because it's like freaking intense. But this was written as a children's book. I feel like I should just mention that. Anyway, one can well imagine that under such conditions, our situation was no longer tolerable. One morning, I cannot say on the day, it was in the early hours of dawn, I had finally fallen into a troubled and morbid slumber. When I awakened, I saw Ned Land leaning over me, and I heard him whispering, "We are going to escape." What? I sat up. "When?" I asked. "This evening. All supervision seems to have disappeared on the Nautilus. Everyone seems dazed. Will you be ready, Monsieur?" "Yes." "Where are we?" "We're within sight of land. I caught sight of it through the mist this morning, about 20 miles to the east." "What coast is it?" "I don't know, but whatever it is, we'll take refuge there." "We will, Ned. We will make a dash for it tonight, even if the sea swallows us." "The sea is rough, and there's a strong wind blowing, but I'm not afraid of tackling 20 miles in that light dinghy. I've managed to store some food and a few bottles of water without the crew's knowing about it. I will follow you. Furthermore, if I'm caught, I'll defend myself to the death. We will die together, Ned." I'd made up my mind. The Canadian left me. I went up on the platform, but the sea was so rough that I found it difficult to keep on my feet. The sky was overcast and threatening, but since there was land out there on the misty horizon, we simply had to escape. Neither a day nor an hour was to be lost. I returned to the saloon, fearing, yet somehow hoping, that I would meet Captain Nemo, inwardly uncertain as to whether I ever wanted to see him again. What could I say to him? Could I hide that involuntary revulsion I felt toward him? No, it was best to avoid him, and best to forget him. And yet, how long that day seemed. The last I was to spend on board the Nautilus. I remained alone. Ned Land and Conseil avoided talking to me for fear of betraying our plan to escape. Excuse me. At 6 o'clock, I dined, although I was not hungry. I forced myself to eat against my will, since I wanted to conserve my strength. At 6:30, Ned Land came into my room. "We won't see each other again before we leave," he said. "At 10 o'clock, the moon won't have risen yet. We'll take advantage of the darkness. Come up to the dinghy. Conseil and I will be waiting for you." The Canadian went out without giving me time to reply. I wanted to check the direction of the Nautilus. I went into the saloon. We were traveling at a northeasterly direction at prodigious speed at a depth of about 150 feet. I took one last look at all those wonders of nature, at that wealth of art treasures assembled in that museum, and at the unrivaled collection, destined one day to perish at the bottom of the sea with him who had collected it. I wanted a final crowning impression of all that fixed in my mind forever. I remained there for an hour, basking in the light emanating from the ceiling and reviewing all those resplendent treasures gleaming in their showcases. Then I returned to my room. I put on my heavy sea clothes, collected my notes, which I stowed carefully on my person. My heart was beating fast, and I found it impossible to keep cool. Certainly my excitement and uneasiness would have betrayed me to Captain Nemo. What could he be doing at this moment? I listened at the door of his room and heard a footstep. The captain was there. He had not yet gone to bed. At every sound he made, I thought he would appear and ask me why I wanted to escape. I was in a continual state of alarm, intensified by my own imagination. So overwhelming was my feeling that I began to wonder whether I would not be my best to walk boldly into the captain's room, look him straight in the eye, and have it out with him. This was an idea of a madman. Fortunately, I controlled myself and lay down on my bed to relax and quiet my mind. My nerves calmed down somewhat, and my overexcited mind recalled that whole period of my existence on board the Nautilus. All the incidents, happy or unhappy, that had occurred since my disappearance from the Abraham Lincoln. The hunting expeditions underwater, the Torres Strait, the Papuan savages, the running aground, the coral cemetery, the tunnel under the Suez, the Sanatorian Island, the Cretan diver, Vigo Bay, Atlantis, the ice shelf, the South Pole, our imprisonment beneath the ice, and the fight with the giant squids, the storm of the Gulf Stream, the Avenger, and that horrible scene of the ship sinking with all its crew. So if you're just watching now and you're like, what the hell happened in this whole book? That was it. That was everything. All these events flashed before my eyes like a series of backdrops in a theater. In such strange settings, Captain Nemo stood out like a colossus. His qualities stood out boldly and assumed superhuman proportions. He was no longer any equal, but the king of the water and genie of the seas. It was then 9:30. I held my head in my hands to keep it from bursting. I closed my eyes. I did not want to think anymore. Another half an hour to wait. Another half an hour of nightmare which could drive me mad. Just then the soft, mellow sounds of organ music reached me. A vague, melancholy harmony accompanied by an indefinable melody. It was like the mournful cry of a soul seeking surcease from the sorrow of the world. My whole being was enraptured, and scarcely breathing, I too was lost in a musical ecstasy that was carrying him beyond the confines of this world. Then a sudden thought of terror struck me. Captain Nemo was not in his room, but in the saloon, the room I had to cross in order to escape. How was I to avoid a final meeting? If he were to see me, he would perhaps talk to me. A single gesture from him could destroy me. A single word could bind me in a board forever. He's so dramatic. 10 o'clock was about to strike. The time had come to leave my room and rejoin my companions. This was no time to hesitate, even if Captain Nemo were to rise before me. I opened the door cautiously. It seemed to me, as I turned the handle, that it creaked loudly, but perhaps a noise of a figment of my imagination. I crept across the dark corridors of the Nautilus, stopping at every step to calm the beating of my heart. I reached the door at an angle of the saloon. I opened it quietly. The saloon was in complete darkness. I could hear the soft strains of the organ. Captain Nemo was there. He did not see me. Even with the full light on, I do not believe he would have seen me. He was so ecstatically absorbed in his music. I crept along the carpet, taking care not to make the slightest noise that would betray my presence. It took me 5 minutes to reach the door leading to the library at the opposite end of the room. I was just going to open it when a sigh from Captain Nemo riveted me to my spot. I realized that he was getting up. I could see him, for a few rays of light from the library filtered through into the saloon. He came toward me, silent, his arms folding, gliding like a scepter across the floor rather than walking. His chest was heaving with deep sobs, and I could hear him muttering these words, at last, that I ever heard him utter. The last that I ever heard him mutter. Almighty God, enough, enough. Could this be an expression of his remorse escaping from this man's conscience? Bewildered, I rushed into the library, then up the central stairway, along the upper corridor into the dinghy. I reached it through the hatch that had already given access by my 2 companions. "Let us go," I cried. "Let us go." "At once," replied the Canadian. The compartment in the hull of the Nautilus was first sealed on the inside by means of a wrench, which Ned had with him, and the same tool was used to open the outside hatch. Then the Canadian proceeded to unscrew the bolts that fastened the dinghy to the hull. Suddenly, a noise was heard inside the craft. Voices called out to each other excitedly. What was the matter? Had our escape been discovered? I felt Ned Land slip a dagger in my hand. "Yes," I muttered. "We shall know how to die." The Canadian had stopped working. One word, repeated 20 times, one terrifying word, told me what was causing the commotion on board the Nautilus. It was not us that the crew was excited about. Did I skip something? No. "The maelstrom," they cried. "The maelstrom!" And then there's a footnote here, and it says, "A whirlpool in the Lofoten Islands, 2 contagious island groups in the Arctic Circle and the Norwegian Sea. Their cod and herring fisheries are the richest in the world. The treacherous tidal currents are a constant danger to the fishing craft that come to fish here. The maelstrom, greatly exaggerated by both Verne and Poe, is south of the Moskinus Island." All right. The maelstrom. Could we possibly hear a more frightening word in the most frightening situation? We were in those dangerous waters not far from the Norwegian coast. Did this mean that the Nautilus was about to be dragged down into the whirlpool at that very moment when we were leaving her in the dinghy? It is well known that the tidal currents between the France and the the Lofoten Islands rushed together with irresistible violence, forming a whirlpool of which no ship has ever escaped. Towering waves converge here from all points of the horizon. These waves form a vortex, rightly called the navel of the ocean, whose power of suction may extend as far as 10 miles around. Not only ships, but whales and white polar bears from the far north are swallowed by it. It was here, then, that the Nautilus, unintentionally, or perhaps deliberately, had been brought by her captain. The submarine was now spinning around and around in a radius becoming smaller and smaller. The dinghy, too, as long as it was lodged in the side of her Nautilus, was being whirled around at a breakneck speed. I could feel it whirling around. I felt that sickly feeling caused by rapid circling movements. We were in a state of extreme terror. Our circulation stopped. Our nerves no longer felt. We broke out in a cold sweat, like that of an agonizing breath. What a din around our frail dinghy. What roars were heard, echoing from miles around. What a noise of waves made as they crashed against the sharp rocks at the bottom of the sea. There, where the hardest objects were shattered, where the trunks of trees were worn down to look like hairy furs, as the Norwegians say. What a predicament! We were tossed around like a frail cork. The Nautilus kept struggling like a human being. Her muscles of steel creaked. Sometimes she stood straight up on end, we with her. "Hold on," shouted Ned. "Hold on! Screw the bolts down again. If we stay with the Nautilus, we may yet be saved." He was scarcely finished speaking when he had heard a loud cracking sound. The bolts had been wrenched from their sockets and the dinghy torn from its compartment. We were hurled into the middle of a whirlpool like a stone hurled from a sling. My head struck an iron rib of the dinghy, and under the shock of that blow, I lost consciousness. Whoa! That was the end of chapter 22. Oh my god! And the last two, my god! There are only two. The conclusion is literally like a page and a half, and then it's the end of the book. Jules Verne, why do you have to do this to us? What the hell is going on? I thought that, like, I'm shocked. I thought Captain Nemo was gonna die in this chapter, but we didn't even see his death. We just, like, heard two words. I mean, obviously, he's flinging everyone to their death, but, like, what the fuck? What the hell? What more can possibly happen to the plot in 2 pages? Ah! Oh my god. Wow. I'm shook. I'm so shook. For anyone that doesn't know, I mentioned earlier in the stream at the very end of the book, stick around because I'm gonna do a little performance for y'all after I'm done this book, which is in literally a page and a half. So stick around for that. My god, I am just like, what the hell? Okay. Shall we continue on to the very end of this book? Yeah, there's an afterword, but I'm not going to read that on stream. Okay, last 2 pages of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which is chapter 23. Okay. And so, our voyage beneath the seas ended. What happened during that night? How the dinghy escaped the fearful, swirling waters of the maelstrom. How Ned Land, Conseil, and I managed to emerge safely from it all, I cannot say. But when I regained consciousness, I was lying in a hut of a fisherman on one of the Lofoten Islands. My two friends, safe and sound, were beside me, holding my hands. We embraced each other with joy. For a moment, it was impossible for us to think of returning to France. Communications between the north and the south of Norway are far from good, so I have to wait for a steamship that runs twice a month from North Cape. It is here, among these good people who have given us shelter, that I am revising the story of our adventures. It is perfectly adequate. Not a fact has been omitted, not a detail exaggerated. It is the faithful account of an incredible expedition, in an element as yet inaccessible to man, but which progress will, no doubt, one day reveal to him. Will the world believe me? I do not know. But after all, it does not really matter. All I am doing now is asserting my right to speak of those waters under which, in the space of less than 10 months, I covered 20,000 leagues, and of that voyage around the world that revealed to me so many wonders in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, the Atlantic, and the North and the South Polar Seas. What happened to the Nautilus? Did she succeed in escaping the powerful grip of the maelstrom? Is Captain Nemo still alive? Is he still lurking beneath the waters, bent on revenge? Or was that last hecatomb his final act of vengeance? His final act of vengeance. Will the waves one day wash up on shore his manuscript containing the story of his life? Shall I ever know what his real name was? Will the nationality of the last ship he sank give us a clue to the nationality of Captain Nemo? I hope so. I also hope that his powerful craft managed to escape the most dangerous whirlpool of the sea, and that the Nautilus survived where so many other ships have perished. If such is the case, if Captain Nemo still inhabits the ocean, his country of adoption, may all hatred have abated in his fierce heart. May the contemplation of so many rivals extinguish in him the spirit of vengeance. May the judge in him disappear, and may the scientist in him continue the peaceful exploration of the sea. My heart. However strange his destiny be, it is also sublime. Did I not experience and understand his destiny? Did I not live that unnatural existence for 10 whole months? So, to that question, asked 6,000 years ago by the book of Ecclesiastes, Jesus, who has ever fathomed the depths of the abyss? 2 men, among all men, have the right to reply: Captain Nemo and I. It's a weird way to end the book. Captain Nemo, you, and Ned, and Conseil, and all the ship crew. Like, what? Anyway, that was the end of 20,000 Leagues Under the Mother Frickin' Sea, y'all. Holy crap. It's done. Dunsicles. Dunsies. Let me give you a bow. Wow. What a book. What a time. That was intense. The end there. Um, yeah, I'm glad that everyone was safe and escaped except for obviously Captain Nemo. I wonder what happened to his ship crew. Like, did they also survive? I don't know. I said I promised a performance at the end of the book. This I made a promise, and I will keep my promise. It's nothing that crazy, but I'm gonna sing a little song for you. In the town where I was born, lived a man who sailed the sea, and he told us of his life in the land of submarine. So we sailed upon the sun till we found number sea green, and we lived beneath the waves in our yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. And our friends are all, and our friends are all aboard. Many more of them live next door, and the band begins to play. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. As we live a life of ease, every one of us is all we need. Sky of blue and sea of green in our yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. We all live in a yellow submarine, yellow submarine, yellow submarine. There you go. Yellow submarine. Okay. Man, this feels so weird, but I guess we're done here. um, Thank you to anyone that has joined me on this nautical journey. And I'll be back real soon for more reading of new books and new lands. All right. Good night, everyone.